All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for coming. I know this isn't the original way we had intended to give this presentation, but this is what we have at this time. So please bear with me for any potential technical difficulties that we run into. But thank you again for coming to my presentation on the intersection of human rights and technology. My name is Cindy Munoz. I'm a cybersecurity analyst at CISA. Um, and these two topics are very important to me, both as someone who is passionate about technology, but also passionate about human rights. And as someone who lives in a minority every day, I've kind of learned some of these things just through experience, but also I can see how technology falls short of serving everyone from also a professional standpoint. And I have also felt the shortcomings of faulty policy and bias, and I can observe and feel the effects of how our technology falls short and exacerbates bias and prejudice, and have seen how technology is an unequal asset and resource seen by the effects of these historical policies and engineering. I have also seen how tech can often be used as a form of weaponized and targeted discrimination, all of these negatively impacting our most vulnerable demographics in nearly every way and aspect, um, including ways we don't even think about or recognize because they have been long-standing ways and assumptions of life. So today we'll just walk through some of these effects as well as the dangers of emerging technology that may take in historical shortcomings and discriminations to a whole new level. And we have already started seeing the effects from that. Um, the effects from emerging technology can also create a larger and deeper gap in the fight and pursuit of equality, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and human rights. And I hope to highlight just some of the issues so that we can be aware of them and how we can be able to move forward and create a technical landscape that benefits everyone. But before moving on with the rest of the presentation, I did want to take a moment and recognize Hispanic Heritage Month, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and also thank Eric Berlardo for putting together RAICESCON, which is so important for our community as one of the largest demographics and also least represented demographics in tech. So we're so few and far between, and we are again, one of the farthest demographics while being left behind in one of the fastest growing fields. So it's critical to have organizations like these to highlight these issues and also provide a space for other tech professionals in and out of our demographic to see this, see each other, to network, upskill, and celebrate our collective breakthroughs and provide a voice in the industry that is so very much critical and needed. And you're probably wondering, well, who am I? Um, I'm Cindy Munoz, again, cybersecurity analyst at CISA. I'm also an adjunct professor at Northern Virginia Community College. And I received my master's degree in cybersecurity from Cal State University San Bernardino, go Yotes. And have gotten a certificate from Naval Postgraduate School and have done extensive volunteer work. Um, and so I wanted to also quickly share a brief backstory. I grew up with all brothers who were very much so into tech. And so I've been around technology my whole life, created my own credentials and email when I was about 6. And would just watch my older brothers, uninstall, install, defragment computers. And I just thought that was really cool. And I was around that. And I thought that was a normal thing. I didn't even think twice about uh, me being a woman or being me a minority. I thought everyone was involved and in the tech community and the tech field and learning tech skills. But when I decided to go for my master's in cybersecurity, the reason I didn't actually go for my undergrad in cybersecurity was because when I walked into the lab, I didn't see anyone who looked like me, and so I felt like I didn't belong. But my passion was was technology. So I went back for my master's in cybersecurity and said, screw the haters, I'm going to do what I want. And I also wanted to make sure that I left the place better than how I found it, and created a club for women majoring in cyber to have a place to gather and upskill and network. And um, I decided that no matter where I was going to go next, I needed to do something to be able to make the tech environment more inclusive, and be able to foster a better cultural environment and take into consideration every decision I make with diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility lens in mind. So, without further ado, I thought, well, with technology growing every day and Hispanics being underrepresented, what have we contributed anything to the field? Well, what do these major technologies have in common? I'm sure you could already guess. They were all developed by Hispanics. So, who here watches color television? Yeah, everyone does. Um, so it was actually invented by Guillermo Gonzalez Camarena of Mexico in the 1960s. We've all seen CAPTCHA or reCAPTCHA. That was developed by Luis Bonan of Guatemala. And the ebook, which was invented in Galicia, Spain by Angela Ruiz Robles, that was touted as the first Kindle predecessor. And some additional fun facts on Hispanics and Latinos and technology. We are going to need Hispanics and Latinos in tech careers. That's going to help solve today's and tomorrow's challenges. Because as the largest growing demographic, we won't be able to know or understand the unique challenges that we face or that we see. Tech can serve us better in. We also have a younger demographic, so that provides companies access to millennial and Gen Z talent. The Hispanic and Latino community is so expansive, and it can provide so many different perspectives. It can help, our demographic can help mitigate bias at a much deeper rate. We also have access to multilingual capabilities. Spanish and Portuguese are some of the top languages on the internet. CIA states it's actually more widespread than English. We Hispanics and Latinos have also been leaders in the tech industry as early adopters of new technology and mobile first audience. And lastly, Latin America has the largest digital banking in the world. And 1 trillion, that's a lot of money. So what does this 1 trillion mean? This is how much purchasing power the Hispanic community has. It's an underserved market with huge potential for tech products and services, more tailored to this audience. Hispanics are an untapped market, and Latin America takes on digital disruptions at an accelerated pace. In fact, Latin America was one of the first adopters and investors in many companies like Uber, WhatsApp, and Netflix as well. So when I was, going through my schooling and through work, I like I said, I really didn't see that many people who looked like me. So as I decided to look up what are our current tech workforce statistics. So clearly, the tech industry has a huge diversity crisis. Hispanics and Latinos are at roughly 4%, and these stats may vary depending on the study, but for Latino women like me, it's actually 2% or less. So we need to really be able to help bridge that gap. There may be other presentations and discussions here today that will dive deeper into that. But as you can see, white males are by far the most represented, and they develop technology that are largely by and for men. Um, Creation of new technologies are informed by experiences, and informed by what someone wants. So it's a reflection of someone's inner thoughts and um, inner hopes and desires. What do they want to see? And so, unfortunately, many ethics were not a part of the design process, um, and that has left out a lot of other people out there from participating or enjoying the full benefits that technology has to bring. So, as you can see, where we are at now has not and will not serve us as a whole. Um, we need to invest in our future, and we need to make our future more diverse, because the future is diverse, and the future is Hispanic, Latino, and the future is technology diversity, inclusivity, equity, and accessibility. So, as I continued through um, my career, what barriers do women and minorities face in tech? And of course, many others have experienced all of this too. There's underrepresentation, hiring discrimination, pay inequity, marginalization, promotion bias. So, um, all of these things can affect minorities and women, from being able to participate fully in discussions and around the table. Women and minorities are more likely to experience harassment and lack of inclusion. Um, there's also a lack of tech equity, tech ethics, and data quality. Um, Tech is one of the most troubled industries for lack of diversity and inclusion, and contributes to racist, sexist, and other discriminatory connotations institutionalized in nearly every aspect of technology and search engines, algorithms, even down to the logical layer that can enable covert and overt prejudice, and in some cases, even violence. And again, this is due to a lack of industry diversity, which reflects biased programming and inadequate data input. And of course, not everyone is bad or intending to do harm. But algorithms mimic human decision making, and therefore, the primary demographic involved in developing technologies and data inputted program their implicit and explicit bias or other limitations. So, if you've ever heard the terms garbage in, garbage out, that's very much so true in tech. And some emerging technology dilemmas, the risk associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, sustainability, data safety, and again, inequality. There's also the false notion that diverse candidates are not equally skilled or qualified, which is very much so not true. Studies of patent data have found minorities are just as innovative and productive in terms of filling patents filed per capita as white men, given the same education and opportunity. Um, and again, workforce asymmetry. This has led to biased environments, products, reproducing one perspective and worldview and servicing one type of client. And personal favorite, the aura of the tech bro. So some, I also, first, let me apologize to the person who's I'm using the photo from. Nothing personal. um, just pulled it from uh, Creative Customs, but Creative, yeah, Creative Commons. So the aura of the tech bro, while some argue this culture fuels innovation, it in reality it harms diversity efforts, it marginalizes non-conforming groups, and dissuades disqualified and passionate people from entering tech, which is a huge disservice to us and to everyone. We need to promote inclusive values and equitable behaviors for ethical and technological progress. Again, this doesn't apply to all people in tech, but it encapsulates the vibes and attitudes that the tech bro stereotype exudes. this culture is getting in the way from preventing other tech passionate people who do not fit their preconceived definition or stereotype, and biases from collaborating and innovating and participating and advancing in the field. Um, Unfortunately, this group may also have a disdain for other fields, so a tendency to ignore expertise from social sciences, um, humanities, ethics. They may also have an unwillingness to acknowledge the existing tech problems with discrimination or accept critiques. Um, Again, there's also an element of privilege. Many tech bros come from already privileged backgrounds, which can um, lead to lack of awareness. Owning devices is privilege, and they may also have a narrow focus on coding rather than all the other aspects within tech that are so important and so critical. Um, they may also feel that just having technical skills is what gives them status and inherently makes someone more qualified or valuable, which again is very much so not true. So how does the rest of our current technology landscape affect society? So I will frankly just breeze through these. There's so much regarding this, but these are just some of the areas. Um, Access. So underprivileged groups often lack access to computers, internet connections, and other resources from a young age. So this ends up entrenching the digital divide. This is also known as e-readiness and the ability to leverage information and communication technologies to foster economic and social development. So this can harm their opportunity to pursue highly paid careers. And it can also add to tech gatekeeping, which keeps those aloof to its benefits and advantages. It keeps minorities and women from being aware of the opportunity in the tech industry, but also in other desired or respected roles. Technology is a fast path to increasing financial independence and privilege. And policy, governments have historically invested more tech access into privileged areas as compared to poorer neighborhoods. So um, there's a lack of tech access in underserved and underprivileged and marginalized communities that are largely Black and Brown communities. So these are affected by systemic and historical disadvantages, um, and it prevents access to resources. I also really quick wanted to point out that we think that the internet and technology is a vast empty space, and it doesn't feel like electricity gets turned on, or it it doesn't feel like electricity is turned on unequally. It seems like electricity just gets turned on and suddenly things work, um, or that there's nothing wrong, or that nothing has been stirred in a particular direction. However, this technology gets turned on unequally and asymmetrically, and these technologies are encoded with certain moral norms or lack thereof, and are not neutral and do not lean towards fairness and inclusivity. So, breezing through these, just some additional effects, network effects. So those with tech privilege tend to have social networks that enhance access to uh, good jobs and investments. Venture funding, so just 1% of venture capitalist funding goes to Black startup founders. So systemic racism in tech finance restricts opportunities. Geography, living in certain areas provides access to opportunity. Representation, employees at most major tech companies are not representative of the country's demographics. And development, ICT offers tools that accelerate economic development. It's a fast track to privilege and economic prosperity. There's also telephone and internet that is so important for many other um, services, such as social welfare, and other emergency services. So the existing divides works unfairly to those in lower socioeconomic statuses. There's also workforce and unemployment, healthcare. So access to healthcare data requires having devices and telecommunication infrastructure. Um, 30 million Americans live in digital health deserts, so they lack adequate broadband infrastructure to leverage telehealth services. There's also barriers around language and training on using healthcare tech that prevent equitable access. Education, so impoverished areas live without adequate internet to leverage access to meaningful education or education technologies. Uh, there's 23 billion less in funding than predominantly white schools in the US, restricting tech access. There's also finance and banking. So unbanked rates for lower income households were 25%, and financial institutions have closed brick and mortar stores in favor of online operations. So technology is used every day to support our well-being and economic success in life. It's not just education we need now to get ahead, it's access and tech literacy. So something I like to say is access to technology is a right, not a privilege. So what does all of that look like in real life? What does tech discrimination look like in real life? Again, I'm going to breeze through them. This could be a whole class, but I only have less than an hour to go through everything. So um, algorithms. So algorithms introduce discrimination or intentionally or not. Algorithmic bias is systemic and are repeatable errors that create unfair outcomes, privileging one category or demographic over another. Applications, modern apps that can reinforce racial divisions and biases. This can include many different kinds of apps. Human resource software. It has often been shown to have racial, sexist, and other bias. I have done personally several experiments myself. For example, car insurance quotes, I decided to use a different last name. Um, I also selected my racial group as white/Caucasian and ended up with better rates despite everything else being the same than when I used my last name or another last name that was not Anglo. And in one of my past jobs, I worked on campus to assist students with finding jobs. And so I did a few experiments on my own time with resumes, and I changed my last name, and but everything else was the same. And yes, I would get more callbacks using an Anglo name than anything else. Privacy is another very important um, aspect. So for marginalized groups, um, a right to privacy is often a matter of survival. Recently, we have seen many states restrict access to abortions. Um, and so people seeking fair reproductive rights were targeted, and health apps were often found to sell data to data collection firms or other third parties. Um, and that put people's lives at risk. Also, big data, predictive analysis from data mining is often discriminatory. And data logging and tracking, black boxing data often has been found to have some corporate secrecy and which was hidden by technical complexity with potentially discriminatory or unethical uses. So we need transparency. We need many different types of solutions to address these. Criminal justice data sets with racial inequities built in to new sentencing models can propagate discrimination. Again, insurance rates and policies, like I mentioned, they can be used to recognize input from names, zip codes, and other information that can be gauged as a minority person and potentially output less desirable rates and coverage. So what can we do to correct our technology and human rights issues then? What can we do now? Um, so we need to reprogram the tech culture and reprogram many things. Public impression on who belongs in tech and what faces we see. Um, we need to be able to have companies take action internally so that people have opportunity to be able to sit at the decision making table. Um, we need to use data for tracking and monitoring conditions or situations in a positive way, um, to help aid or prevent disasters or um, provide other key trends to help benefit society. We also can use cloud computing and big data analysis to predict and prevent human rights crises. Um, we can also use technology to allow us to use collective intelligence to improve and support human rights. So in 2015, an example of this, a shift in tectonic plates beneath Kathmandu was detected, causing a rapid response from digital activists worldwide, and collaborated with mappers who crowdsourced expertise from around the world to create maps of the city. And global volunteers then worked from satellite images to update the research before the quake was due to strike. So that's a very positive effect of how we can use collective intelligence to improve and support human rights and safety. We also need to protect human rights in the development, production, supply chain, and deployment life cycle. So every step of the way, from conceptual to maintenance, um, needs to have a certain ethical lens, fair lens, empathetic lens, to support humane practices and be able to have a more quality experience for everyone. We also need to employ and apply encryption and digital security tools to curb online harassment. Um, our most vulnerable demographics, women and minorities, are most affected by discrimination, violence, or harmful narratives. So using um, mathematical processes, encryption technology can help protect the confidentiality, availability, and integrity of data stored and transmitted. This can protect and women and minorities by anonymizing individuals' location or behavior, um, such as accessing reproductive health. Um, there's many different ways how this can be um, applied. Also, social media to support activism and help to better understand public sentiment, reliably. um, and as someone who uses social media, I can see how the algorithm can often favor certain dialogue or just leave certain dialogues unchecked that are often discriminatory in nature and can affect attitudes or potentially cause extremist ideas and ideologies. We also need to revise and amend uh, current policies and legal systems. So enhance governmental support for budgetary allocations and other regulatory framework, and ensure actions to advocate technological advances do not exacerbate inequality. We also need to teach technical skills from day one in schools, like I mentioned, and focus on putting our least represented and vulnerable demographics into these decision-making spaces, and have them have that opportunity to innovate and reach financial security. ONCD's workforce plan is a great start, for example, that does highlight some of these issues, but we need to collectively continue to work on this because we have a long ways to go to ensure it is as effective as possible and widespread, which is really a all hands on deck effort. So what's coming next and how could emerging technology affect us more? I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because I think we already know what AI and machine learning is. But I do want to highlight really quick just the emerging technology that we that is upcoming. So includes, but not limited to, cloud computing, autonomous vehicles, big data, AI, machine learning. So technological redlining. I'm sure many of you have heard of redlining policies from decades ago, which was a form of segregation that um, that created lines of division with minority groups living in one area and white demographics living in another one. And the white demographics did have more opportunity um, and did have more resources to reach financial security and prosperity. So now we have technological redlining, which is um, essentially the same, but using technology. And starting at the logical layer, as mentioned, AI can be used to support this technological redlining, which involves racial profiling within the algorithms that can be used from Google to law enforcement. Um, I also wanted to point out the new Jim Code, which is a coin termed by Rucham Benjamin. It is a concept that refers to the impact of discriminatory designs that are built into technology systems. So, for example, Twitter's or X's new image cropping algorithm privileges lighter faces over darker ones. And in the book Race After Technology, Ruha refers to these subtle but no less hostile forms of systemic bias as the new Jim Code. Um, and these new technologies will reproduce and amplify bias, and that includes all of the bias: racial, gender, data, ableist, age, etc. So some of the emerging effects and issues with this technology, while AI and technology holds great promise, we have a shared responsibility to critically examine these systems for bias and demand equitable ethical practices that promote justice and empower society as a whole. Um, So violating ethical principles, fairness and accountability, we have already started seeing this. Um, it can reinforce and exaggerate discrimination, profiling, violence, undermine civil liberties, and promote extremism. It harms the most vulnerable groups. It, it more deeply entrenches historical oppression. Um, and with medical AI algorithms designed to help triage, diagnose, treat disease, etc., have exhibited significant racial bias, contributing to health disparities that we already experience, but with AI will become even um, further exaggerated and cause further harm. Um, so as you can see, a lot of the problems are the same as they are historical and ongoing issues, but with AI becomes further entrenched, and the ability to correct and control can become increasingly more difficult and creates a cycle of systemic oppression and prejudice that becomes more difficult to break out of. So additional effects: it can threaten human agency, um, it can erode trust, it can stifle innovation, it can risk our democracy, and that can also have a overlap with social media. Um, with regarding human agency, when automated systems are used inappropriately in high stakes decisions like parole, lending, diagnosing, it undermines fairness and human oversight principles. Um, so there's a lot of ways that AI will cause further harm and make it more difficult to control and correct that harm. So what examples of AI bias are there, and what does that look like? So we are in it for a dream or a nightmare with AI. Um, so we need to correct all of this so that it can become a dream for everyone. Um, but major AI bias example is predictive inequity with object detection, which leads to higher error rates for AI systems. So um, this means that AI systems would fail to detect certain demographics, such as people of color or children. So, for example, self driving cars would fail tests for running over pedestrians whenever presented with people that had a deeper skin tone or children. So, this is due to biased programming from the engineers that failed to recognize Black and Brown people and children as well people. So unfortunately, in the tests, they were ran over. So engineers have since tried to work on improving that. Um, but this is just one example of why we need more diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in tech so that more people can provide input at every point of the development lifecycle uh, during quality control, production, maintenance, etc. Because we all benefit from debiasing and from fairness with improved existing technology and new technological possibilities. So some additional examples: discrimination in hiring, lending, policing, reinforcing stereotypes and disproportionately targeting marginalized groups, and facial recognition systems and predictive policing algorithms that disproportionately target minorities and replicate discrimination through coded systems. So, for example, with hiring, AI systems could make assumptions like John is a better programmer than Mary, when it's probably not true. But AI then learns to hire men. This did occur with um, some very large tech companies. Secondly, again, it can replicate any kind of bias. So, um, there are many small things that we don't think about that actually have a big impact on our thought processes and what we habitualize. So, for example, digital assistants like Siri, Alexa, and Google Home are defaulted to women. And per interviews of why they chose a woman's voice, it was they said they chose it because they thought it was more soothing. Um, However, this can actually reinforce sexism and gender stereotypes, such as the 50s style subservient housewife. Um, I remember when it came out, I thought it was cool, but I personally didn't like that it was a woman. But that was because I personally wanted my own Jarvis, which is Iron Man's personal assistant. And so I changed mine to British number two because that's what the closest thing to sounding like my own Jarvis. So um, without other perspectives in mind, we lack other options. And thankfully, other voices were added later on. Um, but it really limits what type of experiences and we have. And then I'm just going to touch on this graphic really quick. This graphic illustrates a life cycle, in this case, health inequity and discrimination. So it pulls from discriminatory data and application injustices and biased AI design and deployment practices. And the entire cycle is built with discrimination and injustice at nearly every step in a granular way, from the bits and bytes to policies and procedures, and creates a never-ending cycle of this oppression and encoded bias and bigotry. And who here has seen this photo recently? It was on the news. Rona Wang, student at MIT, used AI editing to create a professional LinkedIn profile picture, and the result was a white woman. This shows the bias of only whiteness taken into consideration when developing this technology, and it shows the bias as well of whiteness being associated with professionalism and success and other positive attributes, but um, it can also reinforce the false notion of white superiority for many people. So um, I surely hope this has been since corrected. Um, but this is why we need more seats at the table. So I will briefly share this. Let me see. Oop. Let me see if I can switch this really quick. I know we are running out of time. Oh no. So as you can see, less than desirable outcomes. So how do we correct these emerging technology threats? So just a few, I'm going to breeze through these. Some steps to fixing bias in AI systems, examine the training data set. We need to also have multiple strategies, technical, operational, organizational strategies, to help us identify sources of bias and reveal the traits in technology that affect the accuracy of the model. We need to develop transparent metrics and processes and ensure that algorithms work on more real world data rather than biased data. We also need to improve human driven processes. So model building and evaluation can highlight biases that have gone unnoticed. We need to follow, again, a multidisciplinary approach. Research, development, and other disciplines are important for minimizing bias. And again, diversifying your organization, as well as including people at the table. We also need to modify if-else statements. So as the case with many self-driving cars, a condition, people of color and children, was outside of the original data set. So a new condition would allow output to consider another option for determination. Technically speaking, some examples could include deeper nesting, nesting many conditionals, chain conditionals, and other technical solutions. And we need to encode moral norms through every single part of the process. Because technology is not neutral. It has already been built with morals and values that do not lean towards fairness and inclusivity, like mentioned. And something I like to say is we need to build tech empathy. I hear tech secure by design in many areas, but I think it should say secure, ethical, inclusive, empathetic, and equitable by design. It shouldn't be a feature. We need to build it in. Empathy, we need to build in empathy, and empathy is inclusivity, accessibility, and equity. So again, breezing through this, key elements of a diverse and inclusive tech landscape, we would all reap the rewards and benefits of a more inclusive environment. We can increase innovation, allow for more options, features, user experiences, change the status quo, and add more ways to enhance the lives of all. For example, did you know closed captioning, originally invented for those hard of hearing, has benefited hearing people too? We can now use that feature to be able to view content in a variety of environments if it's too loud or if we need to be in a quiet setting. So that's just one of the benefits that we find with a more diverse and inclusive future of technology. And so, what are some initiatives and commitments from companies and governments that are currently happening? Um, so, companies can play a huge role in helping to ensure that accessible products and services can support and provide digital inclusion and equity. So, by supporting underserved populations amid the acceleration of technology, businesses and governments can have an opportunity to present new pathways for education, empowerment, innovation, and growth. So not only is it a social responsibility, it can help establish the company and citizens to be well positioned to adapt to the evolving landscape and know the needs of customers and civilians. These are just a few initiatives that are coming down the pipeline, but we need a deep concerted effort with leaders that are unafraid, frankly, to get dirty and in the weeds. And in many cases, it may mean even checking their own bias. Um, I did want to highlight ONCD's again workforce of education, national workforce and education strategy, and with CISA is looking to include all types of diversity, neurodiversity, diversity of gender identity, sexual orientation, race, national origin, and more. Um, we have our 50% women by 2030, and I really hope to see that. Again, despite these initiatives and efforts, organizations need to remove the barriers and remove the fear they have. And it's what we need to be able to make real change and progress, level up our technology, economy, well being, and also help protect our security, national security, and otherwise. So, if you recall, I did mention I'm an adjunct professor. So I bet you didn't see this one coming, but you have homework to read. And the following books, you can read the following books after RAICESCON. I highly recommend you take a picture of the slide to reference. Um, but each of these books are excellent that continue on this topic and go even deeper than what I was able to go into today. Um, you can read these books on your own time. There are e-copies. There are also hard copies. So whatever you prefer, um, go home and read them. So finally, I know it's been a lot of information. So I apologize for the bombardment of information. Um, but I wanted to kind of wrap it up that when everyone is included in the discussion and collaboration, again, we have the ability to create new and innovative technology that we've never seen possible. I am personally a huge nerd, and I always dream of a future where I can see the coolest technology in our lives, and I can see that someone who was a woman or was from another background had input, and I could see that reflection through my user experiences. I want to see a future where I can be like, that's super cool, and make that a part of my life and enhance the collective experience. Um, and so I hope I can see that future within my lifetime. But I'm leaving here with you guys with a few quotes. Um, the Hispanic community is and will always be an example of resilience when facing adversity. Together, being proud of our roots, we can continue to build a better future with the goal of achieving equality for all, regardless of their legal, economic, or social status. We must work together to mitigate the harmful use of technologies in order to fully harness its enabling potential. And the 5 most efficient cyber defenders are anticipation, education, detection, reaction, and resilience. Do remember, cybersecurity is much more than an IT topic. So I leave you with that. And again, I wanted to say thank you. And to everyone here, keep unapologetically showing up. Um, We need you as a key partner in tech to continue to revolutionize and pave the way for a better future for all. Um, I'm excited to meet with you and collaborate with you, and look forward again to a better future for all. Thank you very much.